Well, I can remember where I was the day that Japan struck. It was down here just across the street from the Methodist Church. I happened to be outside when I heard the news. Went in and I said something to the guys. I said, well, it looks like we're in it. That was the day that the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor. I was upcoming as a senior here at the what's now the university. At that time it was Fort Hays State College. And they wanted each of us who were seniors to join in the reserve with the hopes that we might be able to stay until after we had finished our degree. Well, they set up a really quite an intense program for phys ed. We got up every morning. We met at 6 o'clock. And it included a number of things. It included boxing, it included swimming, it including up and down the stairway in the Union, or in the Coliseum, all sorts of activities to try to get us in good shape by the time we got ready to go into service. Of course, the war had been going on by that time in Europe, but we felt certainly that we were going to be in it now. I had hopes that with, well, 3.5 years of music that I might make it into one of the bands. But when I got to the induction center, they had other things in mind. I had had 2 years of shorthand and 2 years of typing when I was in high school. They took a look at that and said, you're going to be an Army clerk. So that's when we left, and we left in November. I can remember that because we got to England on my birthday. I can't remember exactly when it was we crossed the harbor, or to cross the English Channel rather, to Le Havre. But that's Le Havre, France. And it's always a few days because we moved from there up through, and I can't tell you the name of the places, but in France, rainy, rainy, rainy. In fact, we called it Mud City. And then we finally hit the line and in a place called Oberreifferscheid in Germany. It's on the border with Belgium. That's where we first actually hit the active fighting. This little town of Oberreifferscheid wasn't much of a big place. And of course, then we ran into the Siegfried Line, which was, I'm sure you've seen pictures of it, concrete abutments, and they were to stop the tanks and so forth. And then, of course, the big pillboxes, all of those things. They didn't stop us. I got in on about the last half of the boats. Well, I can tell you the first day we hit Oberreifferscheid, we came in, of course, under cover of darkness. The next morning, there were dead bodies everywhere. And it was a real quiet trip. Hardly anything was said. Very little was eaten. And, you know, that's the reality. There was a little church there at Trinchot that had taken an awful beating. But inside was a statue of Mary holding a baby. And it was still standing. There was rubble over it, around it, and a couple of the German Tiger tanks, and you know, they get your attention real quick. Anytime you wanted anything done in service, you had to go through step by step. In the company, you had to go to the battalion, and from battalion to regiment, from regiment to division, and so forth. Everything had to go through orders. But the Red Cross didn't have to do that. And the reason, of course, was because things needed to happen right away. And it was about that time that I was one of the Red Cross field directors. There was a field director for each regiment. But this man who was the field director for our regiment came to me and asked me if I would be his secretary. I hate to say it because it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'll tell you why, and this is the truth. I told you that I'd been chosen as an Army clerk. Of course, anything you do in the Army practically has to go through training. I one day had a 20-minute timed typing test, 120 words a minute. Turned out to be the highest one in the regiment. And that's probably why I got chosen. So I spent most of the time with him, although we spent a lot of time going on. We got it in places that our actual company didn't get into. For example, Spa, Verbier. There were a number of those places that he and I got into. We had a separate Jeep. And then they could get in touch with Red Cross. They could get in touch with us. And we could do something about it. I'll give you an example. There was a day, and this was after we'd gotten into the actual fight. There was a lady here somewhere in the United States whose husband was a captain. She had a severe infection. It started with sinus infection, but it had eaten its way into the brain cavity. She was dying. And so she got in touch with us. So what did we do? We phoned Eisenhower's office. You don't do that in the Army. You go through steps, you know. We phoned and he said, get him on the first plane home. This is a true story. The next morning, our general walked in. He said, what? You can imagine the rest. What's going on? And we said, and we told him the story. He said, we put him on the plane yesterday and got him on the way home. That's the way you should do it. Instead of turning from that ledger sort of a guy into, man, you did it right. You know, it made you feel good to be able to do that. We helped a lot of guys, a lot of things that of course, we had communication back and forth without having to go through channels. I was driving the Jeep. We were checking the grease in our transmission on our vehicles. Here came an artillery shell that landed maybe, let's say, 20 feet from us. Thank goodness for one thing, we had some, what they call ammo carriers, armored, well, ammunition carriers, what they meant. From a distance, they looked like a tank, because they are a tracked vehicle. And these two German, I suppose you'd call them spies, anyhow, they were the ones who spotted that, and that's what they were after. Well, we were here on this railroad station platform, and that first shell hit the railroad. It took out a chunk of rail, must have been 2 or 3 feet long. Of course, he and I hit, there was a big culvert. We hit with that and set out the rest of it in the culvert. But if that had been a high explosive instead of an armor piercing, that'd been the end of the line. It's that simple. Day after day, you get up in the morning and you hope you get see night again. You don't know, it's that simple. You're always in danger. I lost some real close friends, you know. It was, we trained together. We were to kind of hold back and let the Army, or the regular Army, meet the Russians. It didn't work that way. It just happened that one night on a patrol, a Lieutenant Robertson and his group had met a patrol from Russia, and that was it. And this was on the Elbe River. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting stories about that area. We had just come through Leipzig. Leipzig, pretty good sized town. But on this little Elbe, or on the Elbe River, a little town by the name of Torgau, I suppose it was 8 or 10 days after the war had actually stopped, the fighting had stopped. We learned that the Russians were holding 250 American soldiers as prisoners. So we got permission to go in and get them. I was driving the lead Jeep, and we must have had 12 or 15 Army 6x, the big trucks, you know, to bring them back. Well, they let us get near the town, but they didn't let us in it with the trucks. The Jeep and the one truck carrying Red Cross supplies got to go in. So we distributed those. Those included towels and washcloths and toothpaste and soap and, you know, all that kind of stuff. As we got ready to leave the town, as I said, I was driving the lead Jeep. We came to the corner where I needed to turn to go back. 2 Russian MPs jumped on my Jeep, both of them with submachine guns, and said, we're not going this way, we're going this way. So we went this way, and it Took about 45 minutes before they finally found and discovered that we did have the right to be there. So they let us go. I guess it was maybe 2, maybe 3 or 4 days after that that they contacted, that is, the Russians contacted us and said, we will trade you a truckload of your GIs for every truckload of Germans who have escaped across the Elbe. You round them up, we'll trade you. So we got them back. But I have an interesting story, and this is true. It still makes the hair stand up on the back of my head. One day, one of the truck drivers, our truck drivers, came by my office. He had a brand new camera. It was an Exacta, a beautiful camera. It was one of the first of the single lens reflexes. He said, would you help me learn how to use it? I said, I'll be glad to. He said, I'll tell you how I got it. He said, I can speak Russian because my dad, as an 18-year-old, came to the United States. So I know Russian, I can speak Russian. One of the lieutenants on the Russian side, Russian lieutenants in other words, asked me how come I could speak and understand Russian. He said, I told him. Well, he said, what part of Russia was your dad from? I said, I told him. Well, he said, that's the same area I come from. He said, what town was he from? So I told him. Well, he said, that's my town. I said, what's your dad's name? And he said, I told him. He said, he was my best friend until he went to America. Take this camera home and give it to him. I don't know how you'd begin to figure the odds of those two guys getting together. But it happened. Well, our division, our army was moving so fast at that time, and it was getting fairly close toward the end. We had run so far ahead of our supply lines that we weren't getting our regular rations for eating, for meals. And it just happens we came onto a German warehouse where it was full of German food. It's over. We're safe now. But, of course, the Pacific War was still going on. And I can remember the day they dropped that atomic bomb. We figured that'd be the end of it, but it took one more atomic bomb to finally decide it. I don't know how many we finally ended up, the United States that is, in Europe. But it was up there with thousands. We lost so many on D-Day. Those old pill boxes that stood up there, they were something else. I've got pictures of those pill boxes and how they were blown up after we got to them. But you know, it was an interesting thing. We had Germans, as they surrendered to you, would hand you their gun and say, next time we'll fight side by side. We'll fight Russians. But, you know, a lot of those friends they're gone now, and I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess.